after we got married, I crashed. We got married at the start of 2015 and I didn't quite understand why. And then I started having all these gut issues, which I'd never had before. I used to be able to eat whatever I wanted, no consequences. And my stomach just started playing up. No matter what I ate, I felt sick. I was bloated. And that caused, obviously, I still had that debilitating fatigue that just I was functioning with fatigue, if that makes sense.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another success story at CFS Health, where we're interviewing someone who experienced chronic fatigue syndrome or something similar and has come out the other end. And I am so excited about this call because there's a lot of backstory to it. But I want to say hello and welcome to Flick. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Man, we go back a long way. It's pretty wild. You came to us was it about 10 years ago?
Yeah, it was 2014.
Wow. So 10 years ago. And you enrolled in the online recovery program, which is what it was called back then. And something crazy happened about 3 months ago or 2 months ago. I can't quite remember the date. I was sitting here in my hometown where I live at my local cafe, and this girl and her partner kind of walked outside of the cafe, and I out of the corner of my eye, I saw her, and I was like, God, that girl looks really familiar. And I've got a really good memory. Like, I've got an unbelievable memory. And so I was like, I think she did the program a long time ago. And I kind of waved at you, and then you waved at me. and then you kind of, you were like, oh, should I come over? I was like, come over. And
yeah.
And I was like,
and then straight away you were like, it's Felicity, right?
Yeah.
You remembered. Like,
I remember. Yeah, it was really cool. And so we had a good chat, and we took a photo, and I got it up this morning because I said, let's take a photo. This is really cool because Felicity was sharing a story with me, and I asked her, what have you been up to and how's this going? And her story was incredible. I was blown away, and she's doing art and all types of things now. And so I said to her, I'm like, well, maybe let's do a success interview at some stage. I'd love that. And you were like, yeah, let's do it. So here we are. Yeah, pretty wild. And the funny thing is, you messaged me when you were up on holidays here, which I didn't see, and you made it happen.
So the universe somehow is like, well, he didn't see it, but here you go, he's right there.
Yeah, go and say hi. I love these types of interactions where people come up and say, oh, I did your program in 2017, it changed my life. And yeah, it's cool. So yeah, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. It's amazing. I'd love to go back before we kind of met 10 years ago, which was a long time ago. Can you kind of paint the picture of where you were at in your life?
So from what made me join the program?
Yeah, before we met, kind of where were you at? What happened? Were you, fit, healthy person?
Yeah. So when I joined the program, I was 23, I think. But my journey with chronic fatigue started when I was 16. And so I just was like a outgoing student, the kid that was like in all the extracurricular activities my whole life. Up until that point, I was like a go-getter, just full of energy, full of beans, and it hadn't been a problem. Like, it never really had experienced fatigue or tight. Like, I was just a normal kid, right? And then when I was year 11, I just one day couldn't get out of bed. And Mum tried to get me out of bed to go to school. And I was like, I can't get up. So she let me have the day off school. And then the next day, and I slept most of that day. And then the next day, it was exactly the same. And my mum being, has always had like a more holistic approach. She took me to the chiropractor. And the chiropractor couldn't even like adjust me or touch me. And they just took my temperature because I was just slumped over and I was just so wrecked, and this was just so abnormal for me. And my temperature was 39 degrees, which is really high.
Yeah.
And they said take her straight to emergency. So Mum took me to the emergency room, and I've been to emergency for many sprains and strains, and we were used to waiting for hours and hours before you get seen. And they checked my temperature on arrival and took me straight through as well, which was so weird. And they just put me in a bed and ran a heap of bloods. And I ended up spending 5 days in hospital, and I just had some sort of virus that they didn't diagnose or anything. They just said, you've got a virus. And yeah, it was just lots of things wrong. Like I was low in iron, I don't know. It was just so many things. And I ended up having a lot of time off school after that. I just never really was the same since. It was like, I was never the same since that period of time.
Yeah, that virus that you had. And because you're a go-getter and you were someone who, kind of did everything, squeezed every bit of juice out of life, it probably, your body and your brain probably was just like, it's too much. I can't do all that.
Yeah. And I think because year 11 is when school starts to get serious as well. And I hated the concept of that I had to figure out what I needed to do with the rest of my life. Like now, I feel like they put so much pressure on you in school. And I think that was on me as well. And so for the next year and a half, so the year 11 and then year 12, I missed a lot of school. I dropped subjects in year 12. I barely made it to school at all. They graduated me, but I didn't get my VCE or anything like that. And by the time I felt a lot better, but for the next 4 or so years, I just had this tired heaviness that weighed over me all the time. And I had this ability to sleep every night for 12 to 14 hours. I wouldn't get out of bed till midday. Just exhausted no matter how much I slept. And I went through over those 4 years so many jobs where I would get a job, work it for a little bit, and then crash because I was overcommitting, doing more than what I was capable of. And then I'd have to leave that job. So that went on for a good few years. It was like I lived in that boom and bust cycle because I didn't know what was going on with me. I'd been told I had post-viral fatigue, chronic fatigue. I'd been put on and off medications, which none of it helped. And my mental health was just up and down with it. And so when I joined your program, my husband and I, we just got engaged and were planning a wedding. And I wanted to be good and feel better for my wedding, which was the following year. And so when I initially joined your online program, I was all in and I watched I reckon halfway through the video modules, took lots of notes. I think I had a couple of coaching calls with another coach who was in your program at the time. And that really helped me. And I got a little bit better. I improved enough that I was satisfied, if that makes sense. But I didn't really change a lot under the surface. I didn't change. I just did enough to
improve a little bit.
Yeah. And so then after we got married, I crashed. So this is 2015. We got married at the start of 2015 and I didn't quite understand why. And then I started having all these gut issues, which I'd never had before. I used to be able to eat whatever I wanted, no consequences. And my stomach just started playing up. No matter what I ate, I felt sick. I was bloated. And that caused, obviously, I still had that debilitating fatigue that just I was functioning with fatigue, if that makes sense. And I learned a bit through your program about boom and bust cycles. I was aware of that and I was learning about, to work within my capacity, but I could never figure out what my capacity was because I never slowed down enough to balance it. I never really wanted to commit to giving things up in order to figure out what my actual baseline would be.
Wow. Yeah. It makes total sense because so many people go through this and two things happen. I think one, so many people go through that where they make a little bit of improvement and they kind of go, well, maybe this is all there is. They're almost limited by their own thinking of well, I've improved a little bit and whatever beliefs people are experiencing, maybe I just need to manage this now, or maybe this is just my limit and I can't improve anymore. And we're limited by possibility. And so we kind of stop the buck stops there. It's like there's no more room for improvement. So that's just what it is. We kind of settle. It's really unfortunate too, because, and, you know, I'm so glad you've been through this and you've come out the other end even, you know, higher. But so many people just stop there. You know, they do. And that's just like, that's just life. Well, I guess I just get to, you know, manage this as best I can. And you know, at CFS Health, we don't really believe in managing illness. And you know, some people do, and that's totally fine if that works for them. But we believe that people can get healthy and start living again, which is what we see all the time. And you're a perfect walking example of that. So there's that. And then I think the second piece that you speak to, Flick, is probably really like, it'll resonate with a lot of people is, I don't want to slow down. I'm scared of slowing down. I'm failing if I slow down. Maybe I'm not worthy if I slow down. And so there's the lack of true commitment to the process to then change your life. Yeah.
I couldn't say no to things. It was my biggest, and I didn't want to. I couldn't say no because I didn't want to. And to me, I didn't realize that, I think this is something you say, saying no is saying yes to something else.
Yeah. So you've got to say a million no's, little no's, and sometimes big no's, but little no's for the big yes later on.
Yes. But I was a 24, 25-year-old that just wanted to, you know, keep up with everybody else. And I was burning the candle at both ends. I was very much like, I'll take on more work because we need more money. And the only way to, that's how I don't really know. It was so long ago, but what ended up happening is so the gut issues and then up and down. So in the lead up to getting married and then in the year after, I was working the same job, but in the 2 years I was in that job, I went from full-time to part-time to casual to part-time to casual at the same job. So it was a closed shop in retail, and in 2 years, that was what my health was like.
It was kind of like
good.
Yeah.
Good. No.
It was the push crash cycle.
Really enjoyed it.
Yeah. It was
So I think that's a great summary of what my life was like and how little I knew my capacity. And so by the middle of 2016, I was so fed up with the pushing and crashing, and I didn't understand it. And I just had that. I was so fed up with like being fatigued and burnt out and having to change like my work commitments and everything, but I didn't know any better. And I remember showing up to work one day and I had this new symptom that I'd never had before, which was pain in my legs, and my legs were heavy. And I showed up to work and I was an hour into my shift and I just needed to sit down, and I just was like, I think I need to go home. It was so weird. It was a different type of fatigue to what I'd ever experienced. And I never returned to that job because the pain never went away at that. Yeah, it just got worse and my legs got heavier and I got more and more tired and fatigued. And after a few weeks of resting, so I remember what happened. I forgot about this, but as well as working that job a few months prior, I decided to start selling Tupperware. So I become a Tupperware consultant because I love Tupperware. And so being that high achiever, I had all these goals that you needed to tick in the firm. And then by the time I ticked all the goals in the first 8 weeks, I crashed because I couldn't. I just was living in this like state where I was, you know, when you feel it in your chest, you're like, I'm not living, like I'm not breathing properly. I'm not, but you just got to get through. That was how I was functioning. And then once I ticked all those goals, I crashed. So I keep forgetting about that part. But yeah. So
the common theme of the pushing and crashing throughout your entire journey. So what was the point of change for you? Like, because you said when we caught up and when we bumped each other at the cafe, you said, you might not know this, but I actually rejoined your program later on. And I actually didn't know that part, which was fascinating to me.
Well, so when I joined, you were offering lifetime memberships. So I always had access access to it. But
This is the old program, yeah.
The old one, yeah. So it was in mid-2016 after I crashed that I went back to the program. So it was right about where I am in this story that I went back to it, and then I took it seriously. Then I remember having notes and planners, and I started making schedules for myself, which was so foreign because I hated schedules and I hated them, but I was ready to change after that. But I just couldn't figure it out. I still just couldn't figure out what my baseline was. And so I started like eliminating things and saying no to things, but I wasn't getting any better. And I was resting a lot, and I'd go for walking was really the only type of exercise I could do. And I'd overdo my walks, and then I'd be crashing for a few days. And the next year in 2017, so I wasn't working at this point, I'd quit my job to get better. And I signed up to do a short art course, which was once a week for 3 hours. And at the start of the year, I was sustaining it. But by the middle of the year, I couldn't even do that anymore. And I couldn't drive myself to the course anymore. Driving was like the last thing that I was willing to give up. It was so tough for me to give up driving, but I just got to the point where I couldn't concentrate and my legs were just so sore and heavy. So it was mid-2017 I really got to my worst. And it wasn't until I got to rock bottom that I was able to rebuild, because my baseline was forced upon me, I think, because I think throughout that year I was still doing more than what I was physically capable of. Does that make sense?
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, well, I was going to say, what was the turning point? Then sounds like the turning point was that. It was like getting to that place of like, all right, I don't have a choice other than to choose something different now.
Yeah, so the turning point was when I was in a wheelchair, which was mid-2017. I ended up needing a wheelchair anytime we left home because I had rested so much and could hardly move that I deconditioned and lost most of my muscles. And so when I did try and move, I didn't really have much strength to hold myself up. And I fought it for a couple of months, but then I got a wheelchair. And that ended up being the best decision because it helped me be able to pace myself, pace my recovery. It meant that I didn't miss out on some things if I had someone that could take me in my wheelchair places. And it meant that I was able to really get my baseline right,
Yeah, you just had to stop pushing and crashing, basically. You kind of went from one extreme to the other extreme, and then it was kind of like that, and then you were like, okay, I need to change this. Actually, it's bringing back a memory. I think there was a time where you actually threw the wheelchair out. Is that correct? Or is that someone else that I'm remembering?
When I recovered, I did a bit of a woohoo, I've sold my wheelchair.
That's right. Yeah, I remember that.
But I think there were a couple of other people like Gemma and Suze that posted like in the group at the time, like they had celebrated getting rid of their wheelchairs. Well,
tell me what was like. It takes commitment, right? Like nothing great happens without being committed to making changes.
Yeah.
How did you change that? Because like it's obviously you went through a huge struggle of lots of ups and downs. Like what was different about it this time?
So a big part of my story is also, and I think I have to add this in, otherwise it wouldn't be able to explain this to you, but a big part of my story was also that for years, self-harm was a part of my coping mechanism.
Right.
I'd never wanted to feel tough emotions, so I would suppress them with self-harm. And when I really crashed in 2016, I self-harmed and made some poor choices that meant I spent a week in a psychiatric hospital. And that was the cascade, the turning point for me mentally, which was that I never want to end up back here and that I need to change my ways because this coping mechanism isn't helpful. And so I had a really great psychologist that I worked with for a long time as well. But knowing that I never wanted to end up back there, and also then a year later being in a wheelchair, and that I didn't want this to be the rest of my life, I just was determined to change, baby steps, bit by bit. And I had a vision for the future. I think that was a big part of it, is that I always held out hope that I would recover, and visioned myself, like there were just little things that I visioned myself doing again. One of them was like jumping on a trampoline. Like I loved gymnastics when I was a kid, and I loved trampolines, and so I always imagined myself jumping on a trampoline. And I really want to have family one day and have kids. And to me, I didn't want to be a sick parent. I wanted to be an involved, active parent. So I think having a vision for the future that was bigger than what I was currently going through helped tremendously.
Wow. I'm so glad you shared this, because this isn't a common conversation in the chronic fatigue world. It's almost it almost feels a bit too esoteric, but it's funny you say this, because every single year inside our mentorship recovery that we now operate in 61 countries, we run a vision. We literally run a vision workshop.
Yeah,
because it's so important, right? Like if you don't have, and so what I'm writing notes as you're talking, and one of the things that's coming to me, I'm writing on my little iPad whiteboard. But one of the things you did was, the vision was like your North Star. So like, let's say you were down the bottom here, struggling, life was crap, really. Like a lot of the time you're just like far out, like I'm in pain, I'm struggling, I'm suffering. But one of the things that helps you get through that period is to have a vision, which is ultimately having a brighter future to look forwards to. But the second thing you just spoke about, which fascinates me, is language. You said, I don't want to be an ill parent. This is not the rest of my life. My life's going to be better. I'm going to be healthier. I'm going to be stronger. And so your language changed too, which then changes your behavior, right? And this is where mindset is so important, because it's not to say that chronic fatigue syndrome is in your mind. It's not. It's very neurological. But changing your mindset, and I'm super keen to dive into mindset, because I know that was a big component for you later on with Gemma. But changing your language, and then in turn changing your behavior, change the actions that you did every single day that you performed physically, which then changed how you felt, right?
Yeah, I remember learning quite a bit of that from little videos you did actually about mindset and just changing simple words. One of the things was from I have chronic fatigue syndrome to I'm recovering from chronic fatigue syndrome, because I labeled myself with CFS. This is my illness. This is what I have. And it was a friend of mine who actually pointed out to me that she's like, do you think it's become a part of your identity? Like who would you be if you didn't have chronic fatigue syndrome? I was like, shit, she's right. That was such a tough pill to swallow.
What a good friend.
Yeah, it was brutal hearing that. And where I really started to think about it, and I was like, this is all I've known since I was 17, is that I have fatigue, and I've probably used it like as an excuse for some things. Not that it wasn't horrible, but it definitely just becomes a part of you, and it's so hard to break out of that illness identity. And it was when I had my own blog and I was on Instagram. So I blogged for a couple of years during my recovery, because it helped me get rid of what I was experiencing and feeling, and I set it free, I guess, when I wrote about it. And I noticed online on Instagram that all these illness accounts, which a lot of them, they're not all of them, but a lot of them, like, who would they be if they didn't have their illness? Because their whole identity and online following is based on them being sick. So can they ever recover? And a lot of them attack people and other people online for saying that it can recover, but you must not have had the real chronic fatigue syndrome if you got better, because I was told that I would never get better. Like I was told by many doctors, I saw so many different doctors and this and that, and it's like, no, you don't have fibromyalgia. Yes, you do. No, you don't have CFS. You have this and blah, 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 and you'll have to learn to live with it. And it's like, well, I understand that that's what the doctors are saying, but I'm not going to take that as my reality, because I refuse to believe that I can't get better. And so I just found evidence everywhere that people who had what I had and got better. But online on Instagram, there's so many people that would just bring other people down for improving and recovering, and I, by the end of it, didn't want a part of it. So I deleted that because it was just holding me back in the end.
Yeah.
And it's just so sad because that's what I loved about your program, is that the online community was so supportive, and it was all about building people up and celebrating the wins. Celebrating the wins is like
100%.
the biggest thing that I think I took away from your program. I'd be like, woohoo, I just walked to the end of my street, and people would be like, you're a weirdo. And I'm like, I don't care.
But everyone inside CFS Help is like cheering you on and high-fiving you. But the other people out externally will bring you down, and yeah, it's a good point. You know, we have a training inside the CFS Health program now that it's called illness identity versus health identity, and we give you a framework on how to change that if it's a problem for you. But you're right, you know, us as human beings, we stand up for what we believe in.
Yeah.
Now, if we believe that you can't get better, what are you going to do? You're going to stand up for the people who can't get better, right? And you know, it's I have a lot of empathy because it is hard. You know, one of my sayings is recovery is hard, but not recovering is harder. You know, both are hard, right? Like, and this is why CFS Health stands for choice, freedom, success, because you have to choose every single day something different, right? Like, you had to choose all the health components that you had to change over time, not overnight, that created more freedom and then ultimately more success, which is what you're doing now in your life, is just amazing. But it's hard. Like, it's tough.
Yeah. Another big component of my recovery was changing my diet. And I feel like if people aren't willing to address their diet, like if
nutrition,
food plays such a huge role in how good or rubbish you feel. And I'm but I think that's probably also one of the hardest parts that people struggle with changing. But I just did it baby steps. And like, if you look at my diet now compared to 10 years ago, you'd be like, how did she get there? Because it's completely different. But I just did it baby steps. And I had an amazing naturopath that I worked with for years, where I addressed my gut health, because my gut health was rubbish. And we know that our gut and our mind are also linked.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a huge part of my mental health challenges was related to my gut as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, I was on and off medications for years in my early 20s, and I know that also plays a huge role in destroying good gut bacteria. But I've spent, the last 8 years rebuilding that, and you can absolutely. I did the Gut and Psychology Syndrome, so the GAPS diet by Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride, and that also truly transformed the fatigue for me, because brain fog lifted after a couple of months of doing that, and the tired, heavy fog was something that I lived with for 10 years, and that it just was relentless. And I think that diet and sugar played such a huge role in that.
100%. If you think about it, like, if you had a Mars bar for breakfast versus something substantial, like a Mars bar and a Coke, versus something substantial, like, it's like not, when you're healthy, you're like, no thanks. But if you replace that with like a high protein, good carbohydrate meal, how much more sustained energy levels, how much better your blood sugar levels are, you're satiated for longer. Like, there's so many things that we can control. And some people on the internet will go, oh, that's a load of nonsense, I eat healthy and it hasn't changed. It's like, you also have to remember that recovery, there's a million different pieces of the puzzle that you're putting together.
There really is. It's not one thing.
Nope.
You have to address multiple things. For me, if I just addressed the gut and nothing else, I wouldn't have been able to rebuild my strength. I saw an exercise physiologist for 4 years who, when I first met him, I was in a wheelchair. And if I didn't just did gut stuff, I wouldn't have physically been able to. Changing my gut health would have helped me regain my muscles. And then there was a huge mindset component, which I think partly I did with my psychologist at the time. And then, as we will talk about soon, I had mindset coaching with Gemma later on. But for me, those were the major 3 components, and they all came together and helped me. But I went through heaps of different things, tried so many things, And they were just the three that helped me improve and get better. And I remember James, my exercise physiologist, used to say to me, if you can improve like 1 or 2%, then why can't you just keep improving 1 or 2%? Like it's so small, but that adds up over a long period of time. And so in the first year of my exercise program with him, I went from a wheelchair to being able to walk like 100 meters, that seems so small, but recovery gets quicker as you get better. I think the start is slow and you think you're not getting there. But I was also very aware that a lot of it was going on underneath, like it's slow healing underneath. And then, it speeds up eventually, but it's so slow and hard in the beginning.
Let's talk about that, because I think that is it's a big problem. Even for members in our community, like the first 3 months feels kind of hard. They're kind of like, they're excited initially because they've just joined. They're like, oh my God, my life's going to change. I feel so great. Like the program's amazing. It's like a buffet of everything. And then you have to implement.
Yeah.
To say no to everything. You have to.
There's elements of grief around that, I found. Saying no, being unwell. Yeah. There's so much grief in it, but I think when you're going through it, I mean, for me, I didn't feel the grief and sadness until I recovered. Because you're in survival mode and you're doing what you can to get through. And so even though you're sad and frustrated and feeling these things, I felt like the grief hit me when I was recovered of what I'd been through. But you have to change, and that means letting go of old versions of yourself. And like, I always had this identity, which was, I love ice cream. Ice cream's my favorite food, and chocolate milkshakes. Who would if I can't have ice cream, then like, it's so silly, but that was, so a part of my identity, I guess. I love hot chips. Well, I hate to break it to you, but that's not going to get you healthy flick. So you're going to have to start to say no, but there are healthy alternatives. And that was what I learned along the way, is that I feel like I'm going off on a tangent here. What was the question?
No, there was no question. This is good. Like, you basically, no, it makes total sense. Like, there are alternatives to everything. I think it's just like a letting go. There's a real theme here that it's just so fascinating to me. And I'm so glad you brought it up, because it's like, it's so damn important. Letting go of the old identity.
Yeah.
And then building a new one, because like, it's like, it all, like, for me, what you're saying here is like, I've just written down like, some of like your tips would be like vision, commitment, baby steps, food is fuel, movement, rebuilding appropriately, mindset, journey. It's like a journey of, letting go, letting go, let new.
And along with changing my value, because my values shifted so dramatically, that meant that friendships shifted. And that was probably the biggest pain point for me, is the relationships around me. And when you're unwell and you're housebound like I was, you notice people just drop off anyway, right? And there's sadness in that. But what I didn't realize at the time was that when I recovered, new friendships were formed, and that a lot of those friendships that I had prior to being unwell probably wouldn't have aligned with the new version of me anyway. So they probably eventually would have sizzled out. I probably would say I have 2 close friends now who I've known, who knew me when I was unwell. Most of my friends now are new, that I've formed in the last 6 or so years. And that's because I changed so much as a person. I don't think you can go through something like chronic fatigue syndrome and not change as a person. I feel like I'm a more understanding, empathetic person now. And I don't try and put there were so many things I learned when I was unwell, and I hated people giving me unsolicited advice, especially from people who'd never been in my position. And so I think I'm so aware now of what it felt like to be told this, or just stop stressing, or just relax, or do this or whatever. So I don't know where I was going with that. I probably already said it, but you just change as a person when you go through stuff like that, and you can change for the better or for the worse for sure. But I chose to change for the better, and health is something that I take so seriously now. And there are things that I will never do again because I'm not willing to sacrifice my health, and the cost for me of doing certain things is just not worth it. And I see a lot of people, I think I said this to you when I ran into you, I see a lot of people being like, oh, I really struggle with fatigue. Like I get tired, and then they tell me about their life and how they were out last night till like 12 o'clock and then they had work the next day and this and that. And I'm like, no wonder you're tired. Like, I know that they're not going to, and like, they're like, what did you do? How do I fix that? And it's like, you've got to be willing to look at your life and go, where can I maybe like rein that in, or, you know, what's your diet like, or this or that, like it. And I think a lot of people just aren't, they haven't suffered enough. This is what we were saying, that they haven't suffered enough to change. And some people's level of suffering doesn't have to be much and they'll change. But like mine was like, I needed to really suffer in order to change. And that's fine. But I got there.
Yeah, exactly. You got there. I want to talk about what you're up to now in a moment. One thing I'm thinking of, and this is as you're saying all this out loud, you're spot on. And I think some people who will be watching this interview, they'll be going, tell me everything you did. Like, you didn't tell me everything you did. And it's like, yeah, because we don't have 24 weeks to share with you every single step. Like, this is a snapshot overview, and it would be way too difficult to even give a nuanced answer to every moment in your journey, because like, look at the list that I've just written down here. Like, this is just, and this is probably just some of the things, you know, that you've mentioned today. But this is 12 to 24 months worth of work, you know, of reconditioning your body, reconditioning your gut, reconditioning your mind, retraining your...
And this is what I would call the groundwork. And this is what I would say why you don't notice, you know, this is where the grief comes from, is because you have to do all this in order to improve like at like 5 or 10%, you know, and it's in the years following of having done all this and really like implementing it and living it. It's not just that I can do this and then I don't have to do it. That was what I realized, is that you can't, which is where I stuffed up with your program in the first place. It's like, I did a bit, I can go back to my old ways now. You know, it doesn't work like that. You have to like change for good. You have to commit to, this is my new life. These are my new ways. And it doesn't mean you're giving up socializing forever. It's just you're changing and altering the way you do things for the meantime. And so, I would just say that's the groundwork. And the base model of what I did was I changed all those things. And then slowly but surely, with the help of the naturopath, the exercise physiologist, and my psychologist, I started to improve. And like, I watched all your videos on YouTube all the time, and I had notes, and I had a pin board with like printouts of with like your CFS logo. They were just quotes I'd stolen from your Instagram, and they were all over like the pin board. And I'd go into this, it was in my art room, and I'd go into my art room and I'd look at it every day and have to pick a quote that it would like I'd think about for the day. That was my inspiration, because I couldn't paint for a long time, but I had an art room, and I would go and sit in it and like just smell the paint and vision like, one day I'm going to be able to paint again. And I think that came with like, and the mindset stuff, right? Like just visioning, being able to do things again. And in the lead, I'd set myself a goal. So when I was about to turn 28, I set myself a goal that by the time I turned 30, I would start my 30s off a new chapter. I would be recovered. And I videoed myself saying what my baseline was then and where it was a year prior when I was really unwell. And then I videoed myself a year later and a year later to see the difference. And then I put it together as this montage on my 30th birthday and posted it. And I set myself, I wanted to start my 30s off a new chapter. And when I was filming the one about when I was about to turn 30, I was like, shit, I did it. Like, I can't believe, like, I don't have fatigue anymore. And my workout, like my movement isn't even movement anymore. It's like I'm full on working out, and I set myself a couple of goals the year prior that by the time I turn 30, I want to get a job and I want to go to the trampoline park for my 30th birthday. And because I just love trampolines and I used to lie in bed and imagine myself jumping on a trampoline. That feeling jumping on a trampoline just so good to me. But we're in lockdowns and things because of COVID in 2020 when I turned 30. But a few months later, I went with my exercise physiologist and I went to celebrate. That was the coolest thing ever because he'd met me when I was in a wheelchair and then a trampoline.
Yeah.
So
good. And like the body takes time to physiologically adapt. And this is what people don't understand. They think they can. There's one key word that you said. There's one key word that really stood out that I think a lot of people will miss. And I'm going to bring it up right now. Implement. Like you can watch a million videos on YouTube. You can keep consuming more information and getting cognitive constipation, which is just like cognitive overload where you're just like, you're not actually applying anything, right? And you need to be fully committed to the process of implementation. You know, we talk about the next right thing inside CFS. It's like, what's your focus for this month? You know, like we're really honing in on specific, like, is it movement? Is it mindset? Is it boundaries? Is it nutrition? Is it a combination of things? But, you know, knowledge just on its own is nothing. It's just information, but applied knowledge is where results happen, you know, and that's what you saw. Let's talk about mindset just for a couple of minutes because a lot of it, particularly at the end, you know, as you started getting better and better and better, one of the things that you focused on a lot was mindset. What was the top 2 things that helped you the most with the mindset work you did?
So you're bringing these up at the right time because it was actually in the month leading up to me turning 30, I engaged with Gemma for coaching. Yeah. So Gemma's a mindset coach that you have in your program, but at the time I just knew her because we were in your recovery program together, and I messaged her one day because I was like, I'm recovered now, but I can feel myself going backwards because I don't have a vision of what's next. You know, I don't know how to, I feel stuck because I don't know, and I'm scared of what's next. I don't know what recovery is. I don't know how to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, your new life. It's like, how do I live my new life? Now that I've got my life back, like, what do I do now? It's a whole new ball game. Yeah. Lifestyle integration.
And I was scared, and I could feel that in that figure, fatigue was starting to, like, it was weird because I wasn't fatigued, but I could feel in this, and there was an element of grief, feel how people would get to this point and just get sick again because stepping into the new version of yourself and into the unknown is scarier than what you know. And even though being unwell is awful and uncomfortable, it's like actually comfortable because you know it. Like, you know that life, and there's some comfort in being in what you know rather than in the unknown. And so when I had coaching with Gemma, the biggest couple of things that stand out to me, the concepts that changed what was next, was that I was gaining things from, and I hope I'm not giving away her coaching tips, but she calls it primary gain, secondary gain.
Yeah, there's a concept in the world called secondary gains, and it's where we basically, we do something or we don't do something because we're getting a secondary benefit from it. So we've had clients in the past share, like, deep down they want to get better, but there's something in their mind or their themselves where they're like, I almost don't want to get better because that means I have to take responsibility for my life and work and relationships, and that scares me. And it takes a lot of courage, but we've had members say that, like, out loud, like, I'm almost benefiting from not moving forwards because it's kind of keeping me safe. And so it's not for everyone, like, not everyone resonates with that, but particularly for some people, it's a real thing. It's like, wow, I really am getting secondary gains from this primary pain, suffering. Yeah. So it is a really useful concept.
Yeah. So that helped me tremendously in a few areas where I was stuck because I was at the point where I, hadn't self-harmed for years, but I was having these thoughts again about it. And I was so confused as to why. And Gemma introduced me to that term. And when I dug into it around self-harm, it was like, oh, well, self-harm came with gains. People I'd feel closer to people. It would draw people back in when I felt like people, like friendships were drifting away. It'd make them worry about me or whatever. And even though that wasn't why I was doing it, it was one of the gains, definitely. And I knew I was ready to get a job, but I was scared and I wasn't taking any steps towards it. And I was using COVID as an excuse because it was 2020 and it was like September 2020 and we'd been through all this stuff. And I was like, oh, I'll just wait for this to be over a bit longer. So that, I don't even remember what it was, but a month into coaching, I went and got a job. So whatever we did worked, because within like, they were doing my resume that was keeping me stuck because I didn't want to do resume. I hate all that. I was like, I'd rather just go like talk to people, but it's like gathering a resume and having this 4.5 year gap where I didn't work and having to explain that was keeping me stuck, and I didn't want to have to do that bit. But then when you sit with what you're resisting, you can move through it and take action. And that's what I did. I put together a resume, and it's the first resume drop I did. I knew I wanted to work in a cafe, and I went to a couple of places and went to this cafe I'd never even been to before, dropped off my resume, and they're like, oh yeah, we think we might be like looking to hire soon. And I just was so honest. I was like, look, I haven't worked in 4.5 years. I was really unwell, but I'm recovered now and I'm ready to go. And they're like, that's cool, no worries. The next day they called me like, hey, do you want to come in for a trial? And I was like, yeah. So within like a week of deciding, putting my resume together, I'd got a job, and I really thought it was going to take a long time. I thought no one's going to want to hire someone who was unwell. Maybe I'm untrustworthy, or they were just so cool and willing to work within my capacity in the beginning. So I think that was the biggest one. What else did?
Well, I think the second one is the confidence that comes. Yeah, the belief and the confidence.
I think believing that my life could be better and that I could change my circumstances, believing that I could change my circumstances, and then finding evidence that other people had been where I had been and also changed. It held such power for me, rather than believing what I was told, that I was going to have this illness forever. Like, yeah, you could go one of two ways there. And I knew that I wanted better for myself and my future. And I have an amazing supportive husband, and we've always wanted to have like a family together one day. So like having that joint vision too, I think, and knowing that I wanted to recover. I also wanted to recover for him because I could see how much of a toll it all took on him. You know, he was working full time and then he'd have to come home and cook and clean, and like he was my carer, but working full time because I was just home alone during the day every day and had support of our parents. But I wanted to get better for him as well. And yeah, I'd say those were the key elements: understanding what I was gaining from the suffering, like where there was pain, that if I was kept repeating that pattern, which was something that often happened in my life, I'd repeat the same patterns in other ways. And it just changed everything for me. And even now I'll think about it, I'm like, why am I doing this? What am I gaining? What's going on under the surface? And another thing I really wanted to say to anyone listening is that you don't have to be pain-free or fatigue-free to improve. I think I was waiting to feel like I didn't have fatigue or I didn't have pain for my life to get better. And that's just not the case. The pain was like the very last thing to go away. Like I had horrendous pain in my arms and legs. I couldn't type on my phone. I had to use voice messages for like a good year. I didn't paint for 18 months. And then when I started painting it, it was like, okay, 10 minutes at a time. Pain was there till the very, very end. And even now, like I'll spend hours painting, but if I'm just very aware of working within my capacity, and I say no to things. I prioritize my life based on my health. I work 3 days a week. I do about 20 hours. I sometimes pick up a fourth shift, but it's just only if I feel like, and if I feel like everything else going on that week, yeah, I could take on an extra shift this week, no worries. What else have I got on this week? Okay, well, yeah, no, because I do all the cooking again now. I could work 4 days a week permanently, but I'd be sacrificing other things in order to do that. And one of them is like eating healthy because I cook for me and my husband and prep our meals for the week. And I'd also be sacrificing time creating my art. And
you got a good, well-balanced, healthy life. Hey, I want to interrupt for 1 sec because two things. One, I love that you said you can't wait to be symptom-free to start your recovery. One of the things we say inside our mentorship is you can't wait to get healthy to start getting better. You have to start getting better now to be healthy later, right? Because a lot of people are waiting for the symptoms to drop, waiting for everything to go away. And it's like they're waiting forever. You have to start now with your recovery in order to get better later, which is a really difficult concept to understand initially, but eventually it sinks in and then you can start to move.
Absolutely.
Give us an update now. Give me an update now. What are you, what are some things you've achieved? Is that your artwork in the background?
Yeah, that's the painting of mine. We're currently in my art room.
So good. Wow. Love that. I love that white sandy beach one. That's cool.
Thank you. So my life now is fatigue free. I never get what I would call fatigue. I get tired. Normal people get tired.
Yeah. I see a lot of people at the cafes who just yawn now, like normal, healthy, tired yawns.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, I earn this tired. Like, this isn't because I slept for 12 hours and now I'm waking up and I'm still feeling like I didn't sleep. It's because, like I earn my tired. And I would like to say that tired and fatigued are two different things, anyway, because I think people who've never experienced fatigue think that being tired is fatigue, but it's not.
Nope. It's healthy, normal, appropriate tiredness versus chronic fatigue syndrome.
Yeah.
Fatigue. Yeah.
So, as I said, I work 3 days a week in a cafe. So I've been working again now for 3.5 years. And basically from the moment I started working, I started doing 3 days straight away. And I knew that I was capable of that because during like my exercise program in the lead up to getting a job, I started going for really long walks. Like I'd just go for a walk for like 3 or 4 hours so I could prove to myself that I was capable of standing for that long. I'd cook in the kitchen all day just to, like I was training in the end to get a job, if that makes sense. So it was still challenging the first few months. There was like growing pains, I guess, in my body.
Of course, your body's not used to it. That's like, this is what people don't understand. It's normal, appropriate response from your body if you haven't done it for a long time.
Yeah. Even the social aspect, because working in a cafe is so social, which I loved, but I would get so, like, by the end of a shift, my head, like, that, like, switched off, your brain's, like, checked out, gone for the day. But it didn't take long until, like, we could go to a friend's house for dinner after I'd worked 8 hours. And I was like, what is this? This life just feels so cool. Like, this isn't even something I did before, I would say I'm even healthier and better than I was before. And I think that's because I'm so good at prioritizing life around my health and when I need rest and what else do I do? So I paint when I feel like it. I'm not going to say I have a schedule around when I paint because I don't. That doesn't work for me.
Sounds like a true artist.
Yeah, definitely. Cook. I go for walks. I do Pilates. I
travel to Australian beautiful destinations.
Yeah, go on holidays, which is something that. So even when I was unwell, going on holidays was never a goal of mine. Like I never even really thought about going on a holiday. It just was a concept that was so foreign. And like when we were on holidays, like we did so much walking and the heat up there is something else. And I still was just like, oh, I'm fine. Like this is cool. I don't know, what else do I do in my life?
Live fully. That's what you're doing.
It's good. I love it. It doesn't mean that like there isn't challenges in my life. Like I still have things here and there that, but I feel like I'm more equipped to navigate the ups and downs now because of what I've been through. And
you've said everything you need to say. Trust me, it's it's good. Well, I want to thank you for jumping on because your story is very it's very much a journey, and I think there's going to be a lot of people who are on the journey that you've been on, and they're maybe like 3 or 4 or 5 steps behind. And I think this just gives so much inspiration and awareness and insight that they wouldn't have otherwise. So thank you for, trailblazing the way and sharing your story. One question before we leave is, for the people at home who are suffering right now, what would you say to them?
I know that it sucks and it feels like it's never going to end. Especially if you have had it for a really long time, you can easily create this narrative that you've had it for so long, so that must be the way it's going to be for the rest of your life. But I would say to them that there is always another piece of the puzzle, which was your analogy, that you can change or move, and you'll notice if it's working for you or not. You'll know if it's working for you or not. And just keep at it, because no matter how many times, like I pushed and crashed so many times, and eventually, like even through the pushing and crashing, I was still like in a sort of upward trajectory.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And there's this thing where I think that sometimes your body's just adjusting to your new baseline, and then you come out of it and you're like, I've got a new baseline.
Yes.
But just keep surrounding yourself with stories of hope and believing that it's possible for you, because you can absolutely get there. And don't be scared to change your values or who you are. I guess it's that we identify with things that just aren't even who we are, and you could let go of all those if you want recovery.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I love that. It's true. I think what a
I feel like I'm word vomiting sometimes. I'm like, is this making sense the way I want it to?
No, that's okay. It is, you're being real. It's great. Yeah, I think that's just such a beautiful bit of advice. Change your values if it's not who you want to be or what you want to do anymore, and have permission. Give yourself permission to do so, just like you have, and like the life and the world and the art that you're creating now is a perfect reflection of the different decisions that you've made.
Yeah. And it's cool to see how something that I just started doing for me, like, because I paint quotes on rocks. They're called kindness rocks, and they're in a shop available to be purchased, and to see that they're helping other people too. Like, I didn't think that I could help anyone, but I'm like just doing something that feels good for me, and then it's going out into the world, having a second life, And I think the reason that the rocks resonate with me so much is because I held on to quotes and things when I was unwell. And so that's why I do them, why I paint the quotes on rocks, because I think they hold such significance to other people going through a hard time.
So beautiful. And it's healing, helping other people too. Yeah. Flick, thank you so much.
Thank you, Toby.
Thanks for having the courage to come up to me when you bumped into me on your birthday.
No worries.
And thanks for jumping on and sharing your story. It's going to help a lot of people.
Thanks for inviting me on. It's been so cool, and like that I got to do this, because when I was in your program, like I was always like, I wonder if I'll ever get to meet him.
You did. Yeah. So nice, Flick. Appreciate it.
No worries. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Au revoir.